After lesson 330 of the Course, there is another discourse that Jesus gives. It's called What is the Ego? That's the name of it, or that's the title of it. So we're going to read that now. It's 5 paragraphs. All of these discourses that Jesus gives in the latter part of the workbook are 5 paragraphs long. The lesson right before is I will not hurt myself today. And the interesting thing about that lesson is I cannot really hurt myself, right? My true self. Whatever is hurt, it really is not my true self. It's my ego. And my ego really is not real. So I can't hurt myself however you look at it, right? Because the ego's not real. So I might think I'm hurting myself, but I'm really not. And my true self cannot be hurt because it's beyond all duality, right? It's beyond separation. It cannot be hurt because it is wholly loving, perfect, and it has no opposite. What is the ego? So let's read this and then we'll talk about it. Paragraph 1. The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. It is the quote-unquote will that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the quote-unquote proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. Paragraph 2. The ego is insane. In fear it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself. And in its terrible autonomy, it quote-unquote sees the will of God has been destroyed. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. Paragraph 3. The Son of God is egoless. What can he know of madness and the death of God when he abides in him? What can he know of sorrow and of suffering when he lives in eternal joy? What can he know of fear and punishment, of sin and guilt, of hatred and attack, when all there is surrounding him is everlasting peace, forever conflict-free and undisturbed, in deepest silence and tranquility? Paragraph 4. To know reality is not to see the ego and its thoughts, its works, its acts, its laws, and its beliefs, its dreams, its hopes, its plans for its salvation, and the cost belief in it entails. In suffering, the price for faith in it is so immense that crucifixion of the Son of God is offered daily at its darkened shrine, and blood must flow before the altar where its sickly followers prepare to die. Paragraph 5. Yet will one lily of forgiveness change the darkness into light, the altar to illusions to the shrine of life itself, and peace will be restored forever to the holy minds which God created as his Son, his dwelling place, his joy, his love, completely his, completely one with him. All right. What is the ego? Let's go through it again. Okay, we're going to go through it a little bit slower now. You may have noticed in paragraph 3 it was kind of a turnaround, right? The first 2 paragraphs talk about ego, and then 3rd paragraph says, but the Son of God is egoless, right? The Son of God does not have an ego in reality. So what is the ego? This is, the $64 million question, because the Course talks all about the ego, right? But we still might not have a good sense of what ego is. And the way the Course talks about ego is different than how, it's not Freudian, right? We're not talking about, it's not Freudian psychology anymore, right? This is not Freud's ego. This is not even ego as we normally talk about ego. A lot of people think, well, I need my ego, right? Because my ego protects me, my ego is my defense mechanisms, My ego is my instincts. In a sense, you might say that's true, but the Course is talking about the ego in a deeper sense, right? And in the sense in which the ego is that part of ourself which is at odds with our true identity, right? It's all false identifications that we that we accept, and which leads to suffering, right? Because we accept those false identifications, and there really is only one identity, which is true, which is what the Course calls the sonship. All right, so let's read it, and then we'll talk more about it. Paragraph 1, the ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. It is the quote-unquote will that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the quote-unquote proof that strength is weak and love is fearful. Life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. So the ego is in direct opposition to God. And in fact, what the ego does is it makes God in its own image. This is Freudian, because Freud basically said something like this, that God did not make humans in God's image, but humans made God in their image, in their own image. And the Course, basically, the way the Course puts it is that separation, the tiny mad idea of separation entails, is to then create a God in the image of separation. When what would that look like? That would look like a jealous, avenging God that wants to punish you for the sin of separation. Is gonna come get you. Is gonna and is basically created this whole crazy universe just so that we could suffer. Right? Even though you might say, well, God created us with free will, and that's the Course has a different perspective, which is what Jesus has been talking about, which is that there is really only one will. There is no free will in reality. There's only one will. There's only one reality. There's only one God, and God's will is everything. The will of the ego is really nothing. But according to the ego, God's will is what the ego wants to get rid of, right? That God's will is the enemy of the ego. So in other words, the ego's whole game is to get God out of the picture, completely out of the picture, right? Paragraph 2, the ego is insane, right? Based in the tiny mad idea. In fear it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. Okay, so fear. The ego represents fear. The ego symbolizes fear. Fear is emblematic of what the ego is. And so if you have any fear, if you are making choices at all from a sense of fear, or from fear, let's just say from fear, like fear-based thinking, fear-based choices are all egoic. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself, right? So the ego, in a way, life in the body, life in the world, is basically the ego's victory over God, right? Right? A big F you to God, like God, you're gone. There is no God, right? I am now my own authority. I am my own, you know, the captain of my ship. And in its terrible autonomy, right? That's what I was just saying. It quote unquote sees the will of God has been destroyed, right? So the ego, again, is victor, has destroyed the will of God, has destroyed God, has made God an unloving father, has sent God away. This is like the prodigal son, except the prodigal son thinks that it didn't go, he didn't go away, but rather he sent God away. God the Father was sent away by the prodigal son. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. Let's read this one more time. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. Okay, so the ego basically is living in fear. You know, is like if you follow the ego, the extent to which you follow the ego, you're living in fear. You're living in pain and suffering. You're living in a world without meaning, without purpose, because you have denied your reality. So the extent to which you take the ego as your idol, right? And that's how Jesus started. The ego is idolatry. The extent to which you take the ego identity as your identity is the extent to which you are going to suffer, right? You're going to feel pain and suffering. But then paragraph 3 is the turnaround, right? The Son of God is egoless. What can he know of madness and the death of God when he abides in him? What can he know of sorrow and of suffering when he lives in eternal joy? What can he know of fear and punishment, of sin and guilt, of hatred and attack, when all there is surrounding him is everlasting peace, forever conflict-free and undisturbed in deepest silence and tranquility? So the true nature of the Son is no ego whatsoever, which means no suffering, no attack, no guilt, no sin. All that is gone. All there is, you could say, the oneness, the peace, the joy everlasting, right? Eternal peace, eternal joy. And really, it's really, you could just umbrella term eternal love, perfect love that is eternal. So the ego really is really nothing in reality, because the Son of God has no ego. No ego means that the ego does not really exist in reality. So, and if it doesn't exist in reality, in ultimate reality, it doesn't exist now either, right? Even here and now. This is the point of the Course, is that right? It's not like, well, ultimately, I don't have an ego, right? But the point is to say, you don't even have an ego now either, in reality, right? And you don't have to act as if you have an ego. You don't have to live by your ego. You don't have to let your ego orchestrate your life, or think that you need your ego to orchestrate your life. In other words, you do not have to base anything on fear, anything on lack, limitation, but rather you can base everything on this idea of the atonement, which is that I am love, and that has never changed. I am not an ego. I am free. I have no sin. I have no guilt. I'm one with God even now, right? Paragraph 4. To know reality is not to see the ego and its thoughts, its works, its acts, its laws, and its beliefs, its dreams, its hopes, its plans for its salvation, and the cost belief in it entails. In suffering, the price for faith in it is so immense that crucifixion of the Son of God is offered daily at its darkened shrine, and blood must flow before the altar where its sickly followers prepare to die. So, you can, in other words, you can live in reality right now, you do not have to live by the ego. And if you do, you are sacrificing to idols, right? Right. This is the Course's version of the biblical idea, right? You shall have no other gods before me. Do not make any graven images. Well, the ego is that, right? The ego is making false images of what we are, and in doing that, we experience suffering. But we don't need to if we just accept what we truly are, and we can do that right now, and we don't have to wait. We don't, it's not like heaven is going to, it's like at some far off time we will get to heaven, but rather heaven is right here and now, if we so choose, right? And that we can make that choice in any moment. There is only one moment. Paragraph 5. Yet will one lily of forgiveness. This is interesting that Jesus brings this back in, this idea, the symbol of the lily, which symbolizes forgiveness. Yet will one lily of forgiveness change the darkness into light, the altar to illusions to the shrine of life itself. And peace will be restored forever to the holy minds which God created as his Son, his dwelling place, his joy, his love, completely his, completely one with him. Let's read that one more time. Yet will one lily of forgiveness change the darkness into light, the altar to illusions to the shrine of life itself, and peace will be restored forever to the holy minds which God created as his Son, his dwelling place, his joy, his love, completely his, completely one with him. It's an interesting paragraph. We'd have to really think about this paragraph, like why Jesus wrote it the way he did. But it's really just emphasizing the idea of forgiveness, right? Meaning setting the son free. How do you set the son free? Well, forgiveness is the idea that you let go of the judgment, right? You let go of this idea that the ego is real in any regard, right? And you give everyone a free pass, right? You let everyone out of prison in your mind, even if it's just, even if you just do a little bit, you're going to feel the effects of releasing the judgment, right? Another way of saying releasing judgment, because usually we have a very difficult time fully being non-judgmental. But what we can start to do is we can start to question our judgments, right? Like, is that true? Is that idea, is that thought that I'm having true? Right? Or is there room to question it? Because if there's room to question it, then we're not stuck, right? As soon as we stop questioning our beliefs, then we get stuck. But once we can start to open the door to say, well, is that true? Maybe that's not true, right? Maybe, there's another way I can see that, right? And if there is, the light can come in, because if the doors and the windows of the house are shut, right, the light cannot come in. But once you open the door, even just a little bit, the sun is going to come in. So this is where, the Course is not a one-shot deal. It's not this like the light is going to just, I mean, it can happen that way, and it does happen that way. But even if it does, even if you have a moment where you just have a mystical experience, right, that takes you beyond everything, you still are going to come back, and you still are going to be faced with judgments, right? And so what we're really talking about is slowly but surely, you question. You start to question everything, And then what will happen is you will become more and more established in what it is, right? Your true self, your egoless self. You're going to become more and more established in your true authentic self versus any false selves, inauthentic selves, false identities, whatever name you want to give to it. All of those are going to fall by the wayside, right? And you will be more and more in your true self, even in your body, right? Even here and now in this world of perception, this world of separation, you will be living in your true self. So more power to you in that regard. Godspeed, and thanks for tuning in. Hope this was helpful. I'm gonna do maybe today, maybe tomorrow, less than 3:30. I will not hurt myself again today, and then we'll go on. We're getting really towards the end here. And let me just say that I'm planning on doing the whole course again, going through the whole course again, and I will say more about that as we get closer. Thank you so much, and see you very soon.